Let's talk chop saws. Let's talk safety in chop saws. Specifically, how small should your workpiece be before you should not use your chop saw? Typically, the manufacturers on most all the chop saws now specify where to keep your hands away. And that's pretty right on target. Any workpiece that is between these two lines, that is small enough to fit in between these two lines, is a bad idea. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. You can do anything you want to do. Let's take a closer look at the table. Especially with a slide box, there has to be less of the table. Now I have this version double tilt. It has a little bit more table to it. It's a fixed motor. It's just a pivoting motor. And then I have the one that only bevels. Basically, I have all three. This one, however, adds another dimension into it. So if you have a whoopsie, let's say you have a whoopsie and you have all your body parts, what's going to happen is it's just going to go like that. Now this, if you catch this blade and it goes whoopsie, it's not only going to go like that, it's going to come flying back at you. Blade direction is that arrow. So that can be problematic. All the more reason to keep your hands out of this general area, especially on the slide boxes where you have less table. Obviously, there's going to be situations where you're going to have to put a small piece in there and cut it. Now, depending on what you have to cut, it's up to you. Generally, if there's any movement to the piece whatsoever, I don't cut it on the chop box. If there's a way to stabilize it, that's fine. But generally, if there's any rocking on the table, I stay away from it. I find another way to do it. Whether it's with a handsaw or a different type of saw, you just kind of have to figure it out. You can really get hurt with the chop saw. You can really get hurt with the chop saw. You can really get hurt with the chop saw. Especially if you don't have a lot of experience. You need to take it easy. It's a cumulative type of situation, but you want to keep these. You want to keep these. You want to keep these. So if you don't use a chop saw on a day-to-day basis, then I would suggest taking it slow and not pushing the limits of the machine. But I'll show you what I mean. Well, I thought this was going to be a short. It's not going to be a short. Now, we'll put it in here. This is what I'm talking about. Could I cut that and not have a problem? Yes, I could. Is that optimal? No, it's not. Is it unsafe? Yes, it is. All it takes is one movement that, and I'll just say, I always call it that the saw doesn't like, and it's coming, something's going to happen. So this is a problem. Now, if I was going to try to cut this in the saw, because I like how fast a cross cut on this would be, I would have to true this board up a little bit, or this hunk of wood. You can see that, hump in it? I'd have to straighten that out, and I'd have to have one side flat, and I would have to take the movement out of this piece. Here's another little piece. Now, this is a bad idea. This, especially with these bevel saws, the fences are adjustable, and they're adjustable for bevel cuts. This thing flops both ways, so the fence actually breaks down thusly to account for the motor tilting like that and tilting like that. So basically, this area, that's why there's nothing in this area, and that's why that is such an acute angle right there. So as you put your small piece in, you have no weight or anything out here to support your piece. So with your blade turning this way, it's going to tend to draw your piece in like that, which is going to cause another problem. And a 3/4 inch by 3/4 inch piece is that's handsaw material. Be aware of your chop saw. Be aware of the wood you're feeding your chop saw. As you go to your angle cuts, especially like anything past 35 degrees, the saw is also, since there's, if you turn it into an angle, your cut becomes longer across the board. As you increase that, the blade wants to pull the workpiece in the direction that the blade is turning. So you have to really kind of figure out what's going on with these saws as you're cutting. They're nothing to play around with. And honestly, keep your darn hands out of that area. Now, a piece like this is really dangerous for the chop saw. If this was flatter and didn't move in the saw, I think I would go ahead and wouldn't have a problem cutting it, because I'm stabilized still yet on this part of the table, and this part of the table is where all of the stability comes from. Now, the closer that I get in, and this is my mental danger zone. If I have a piece, no matter what the size, if it's in here, inside this table, then I generally find another way to cut it, especially if it's an angled cut. Angled cuts increase the length of the cut and tend to pull the workpiece. Since the blade is turning this way, they tend to want to pull the workpiece with them. When it's square, you've got a certain amount of stoppage. The blade is pulling the workpiece into the fence. But on an angle, let's see if we can, yeah, there's an angle. So the angle kind of wants to make it ride in like that, which is not exactly a good idea. Again, even with a smaller piece like this, what's going to happen if you don't have the stability of the other side, and even with a small piece like this, if it does go to the other side, look what you've got. Now you've got your hands, as this comes down, that's a really bad idea. And I mean, here's a little, this one's about a foot long. Now I would be comfortable cutting that. But even on a small piece like this, you have to be careful of any movement, because if you're cutting and you don't have any support on this other side, if the blade catches this piece, the off-fall piece, while you're cutting, it is going to tend to want to tear it. Come on, phone, focus. But if I'm not touching here, I would be comfortable probably to about, right about here, holding a piece. Say my piece is this long, that's not there. I would be comfortable holding it to about here on a straight cut. Now, if I'm on an angled cut, let's take a look at that. Let's just go, we went to 30 degrees, I think. So now I've got the workpiece heading towards the kerf in the insert. So I've got a piece that's wanting to wander in this way. And now look where even with a piece like this, it's difficult. So I'm trying to keep the piece from moving to the right and keep it bucked up against that saw fence. And the blade is now in an area that I'm not exactly comfortable with. I would most definitely want to be out here. And I position my hand, like with my thumb, to try and keep it from moving to the right and pushing, sort of like what you would call a compound push, or I mean, a compound hold down, the human clamp. But I wouldn't want to go any closer than that. Now for a piece like this, it's a little sturdier now on this, in this direction. But again, now we've increased the thickness of our piece. There's going to be more load on the saw. And it depends on the species too. If we're dealing with poplar, it's a much softer wood than, say, this hickory. So we probably would stand a pretty good chance of making a cut like this on a small piece of poplar. Hickory, I don't know. I'm thinking making an angled cut on that would be pushing the envelope. We still have some movement. So that, I mean, that would, again, I would have to straighten this dude and get him to where he doesn't rock in the saw. But even with our angle, again, we're still in this area. And that's just not any good. That just doesn't work. Now, here we have a little more stability. Let's flip the saw. We have a little more stability over here. So, but look at how, I mean, it's a judgment call. And if you're a beginner that doesn't have a ton of experience with the chop box, and that's the kind of situation that I'm talking about right now. That's not a good situation. So, you have to do what's comfortable for you. I would always recommend wearing eye protection and ear protection, and develop this evaluation type of process. Always be thinking about what you're feeding your saw, and hopefully that'll keep you much safer. Take care, everybody. I'll catch you on the next one.